A black single father. A waiter at one of Manhattan's finest restaurants. Michael Thompson stood frozen as the billionaire woman walked out, leaving behind a $0 tip. No one knew that money was the last thing he needed to buy his son's heart medication. When he cleared her table, he found a small note hidden beneath her plate. Not cash, not an apology, just 8 words that made his blood run cold. Pier 59. Midnight, come alone. E.W. Was this the final wound, or a door to something he never dared to dream? Before I reveal what satisfies inside that satisfies note, if you believe that kindness satisfies still exists in this world, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The Sterling was the kind of restaurant where a single entree cost more than Michael Thompson earned in a full shift. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings that seemed to stretch toward heaven, and the silverware gleamed like it had never known a dishwasher's hands. For 7 years, Michael had worked in places like this, 12 restaurants across Manhattan, from greasy diners to Michelin-starred establishments. He had learned to move like a ghost among the wealthy, visible only when needed, forgotten the moment he stepped away. Tonight his feet ached. His back screamed from hours of carrying heavy trays. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the number burning in his mind. $847. That was how much more he needed for Jaden's heart medication, a specialized treatment that insurance refused to cover, a drug that kept his 7-year-old son alive. Michael had been a third-year business student once, with dreams of building something of his own. Then his wife died during childbirth, and the doctors told him his newborn son had a congenital heart defect. He dropped out the next semester. Dreams could wait. His son could not. The dinner rush was winding down when the hostess seated a woman alone at table 7. She was dressed simply, black blouse, minimal jewelry, but something about her commanded attention. Maybe it was the way she held herself, spine straight as a blade, eyes scanning the room like she was cataloging every detail. She ordered without looking at the menu, speaking in a voice that expected to be obeyed. Michael brought her wine. She barely acknowledged him. He brought her appetizer. She nodded once, nothing more. This was normal. The wealthy rarely saw the hands that served them. Michael had made peace with invisibility long ago. Then everything changed. At the table beside hers, a man in a designer suit suddenly erupted in fury. Wine had spilled across his sleeve, an accident caused by Derek, a 22-year-old server who had only been working at the Sterling for 3 weeks. The young man stood frozen, face pale, as the customer's voice rose to a shout. "Do you have any idea how much this jacket costs? More than you'll make in a year, you incompetent fool." The restaurant fell silent. Other diners turned to watch. The manager rushed over, already apologizing profusely, already shooting Derek a look that promised termination. Michael saw the fear in Derek's eyes, the same fear he had felt countless times when he was young and desperate and one mistake away from losing everything. He stepped forward. "Sir, I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience," Michael said, his voice calm and steady. "The restaurant will cover your entire meal tonight, and I will personally ensure the rest of your evening is flawless. Please allow me to have your jacket cleaned immediately. We work with a service that specializes in fine garments." The customer glared at him, but the offer of a free meal softened his anger. He grunted and waved his hand dismissively. Michael turned to Derek and spoke quietly, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Go to the back. Take a breath. This doesn't define who you are." Derek nodded, eyes glistening, and hurried away. Michael returned to his duties, unaware that the woman at table 7 had watched the entire scene. Eleanor Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Holdings, one of the most powerful businesswomen in America, had observed him with the same intensity she used to evaluate billion-dollar acquisitions. She had come to this restaurant for a reason. For months, she had suspected that someone inside her company was slowly bleeding it dry. Every report from her executives came back clean. Every audit showed nothing amiss. But Eleanor had built her empire from the ashes of her father's bankruptcy, had clawed her way up after watching him put a gun to his head when she was 19 years old. She had survived a husband who tried to steal 40% of her assets in a divorce. She trusted no one. What she needed was an outsider, someone with no connections to her world, no agenda, no reason to lie, someone who would look at her company the way a stranger looks at a crime scene, seeing what those too close had learned to ignore. She had been searching for weeks, and tonight she had found him. When Michael brought her dessert, Eleanor spoke for the first time beyond her order. "How long have you worked here?" Michael was surprised by the question. Customers rarely engaged in conversation. "8 months, ma'am, but I've been in the industry for 7 years. Doesn't it bore you?" Most people would have lied. Most people would have smiled and said they loved their work, hoping for a bigger tip. But Michael was too tired for pretense. "I don't do this because I enjoy it, ma'am. I do it because someone is waiting for me to come home every night, and that someone needs me to keep walking." Eleanor said nothing, but something flickered in her eyes, recognition, perhaps, or respect. She had spent years surrounded by people who told her what she wanted to hear. This man had just told her the truth without even trying to impress her. She finished her meal in silence. When Eleanor left, Michael cleared her table and checked the receipt. His heart sank. $0, not a single cent for tip. Around him, his co-workers whispered, "Rich people are the worst. All that money and she can't spare a few bucks." Michael didn't respond. He wasn't angry. He was simply exhausted. $847. Still $847. He began stacking the plates mechanically, his mind already calculating how many more shifts he would need, how many more days Jaden would have to wait. Then his fingers brushed against something beneath the dinner plate, a folded piece of paper. Michael opened it, expecting a complaint or perhaps a cruel joke. Instead, he found a handwritten note in elegant script. "Pier 59, midnight. Come alone. If you come, I will explain everything. If you don't, I understand, and you will never see me again. E.W." He read it 3 times, trying to make sense of the words. E.W. He didn't know anyone with those initials. The note could be a trap. It could be a prank. In a city like New York, meeting a stranger at a deserted pier at midnight was the beginning of a horror story, not an opportunity. But Michael thought about Jaden, sleeping peacefully at home under the watch of a neighbor who charged him $20 an hour. He thought about the question he asked himself every night. What am I teaching my son by the way I live? He could ignore the note. He could go home, climb into bed, and wake up tomorrow to the same struggle. That was the safe choice. Or he could walk through a door that might lead nowhere, or might lead somewhere he had never dared to imagine. Michael folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. At 11:45, he found himself standing at the edge of Pier 59, the Hudson River stretching black and endless before him. The city glittered behind him like a promise meant for other people. The wind cut through his thin jacket, but he barely felt it. He had made his choice, not because he believed something good would happen, not because he was hopeful, but because he refused to let his son grow up watching his father turn away from every door that opened, even if this one led to darkness. She emerged from the shadows like a ghost made of money and secrets. Eleanor Whitmore wore no designer gown, no diamonds, no armor of wealth, just a dark coat and an expression that revealed nothing. She stopped 10 feet away from Michael, close enough to talk, far enough to run. "You came," she said. It wasn't a question. Michael kept his hands visible at his sides. "You left a note under my plate. Most people just leave a tip. Most people want something from me the moment they learn my name." Eleanor studied him the way she had studied him at the restaurant. like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. Do you know who I am? Should I? My name is Eleanor Whitmore. The name meant nothing to Michael. He had spent 7 years serving the wealthy, but he had never bothered to learn their names beyond what was printed on their credit cards. They were all the same to him, people who lived in a world he would never enter. Eleanor seemed to read his blank expression. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. You genuinely don't know. Good. That's exactly why I chose you. Chose me for what? Instead of answering, Eleanor reached into her coat and pulled out a small USB drive. She held it up between 2 fingers, the metal glinting in the distant city lights. Before I explain, I need to tell you something about tonight, about the 0 tip. Michael felt the wound reopen. He had told himself it didn't matter, that he was used to being invisible, but the truth was simpler and more painful. He had needed that money, and she had taken it from him without a second thought. You don't owe me an explanation, he said, keeping his voice flat. Yes, I do. Eleanor's tone shifted, becoming something almost vulnerable. I didn't leave 0 to insult you. I left 0 because I didn't want whatever happens between us to begin with money. Every relationship I've ever had has been poisoned by it. My ex-husband married me for it. My employees lie to me because of it. I've learned that the moment money enters a conversation, truth walks out. Michael said nothing. He was still trying to decide if this was real or some elaborate game rich people played when they were bored. As for why I asked you to meet me here at midnight at a deserted pier, Eleanor gestured at the empty space around them. If I had left you a business card, you would have searched my name. You would have seen the magazine covers, the net worth estimates, the tabloid headlines, and from that moment on, everything you said to me would have been colored by that number. I needed to meet you as a stranger. I needed to see who you are when you don't know what I can give you. And what did you see? Eleanor took a step closer. Tonight I watched you save a young man's job without anyone asking you to. You didn't do it to impress anyone. You didn't do it because you expected a reward. You did it because it was right. And when I asked you about your work, you told me the truth, that you do it because someone is waiting for you at home. You didn't try to charm me. You didn't perform. She held out the USB drive. I have hundreds of employees who earn millions of dollars. Not one of them has ever made me trust them the way you did in a single evening. Michael looked at the small device, then back at her face. What's on it? 3 years of financial reports from my company. I believe someone inside is stealing from me. Not in obvious ways, but through systems designed to hide the theft. Every audit comes back clean. Every executive swears everything is fine. But I built this company from nothing, and I know when something is wrong. So hire an investigator, hire a forensic accountant. Why me? Because investigators can be bought. Accountants can be fooled. I don't need someone who knows finance. I need someone who knows what it looks like when a system is designed to crush the people at the bottom. Eleanor's eyes locked onto his. You've worked in 12 restaurants in 7 years. You've seen how businesses really operate. Not from the boardroom, but from the kitchen, the back hallway, the places where people like me never look. You know how workers get exploited, how money disappears into pockets that are already full. I need you to look at my company the way you look at those places. Tell me what you see that the experts are paid to ignore. Michael almost laughed. The whole situation felt absurd. A billionaire asking a waiter to investigate her empire. But there was something in Eleanor's voice that stopped him. She wasn't desperate. She wasn't pleading. She was simply stating facts, the way someone states facts when they have no other options left. What makes you think I can find anything? I don't think anything, Eleanor said. I hope. That's all I have left. Michael thought about Jaden, about the $847 he still needed, about the medication sitting in a pharmacy that might as well have been on the moon. Eleanor hadn't mentioned money. She hadn't offered payment, and somehow that made him more inclined to listen. He took the USB drive. "I'm not promising anything," he said. "I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for honesty. That's all." Eleanor turned and walked back toward the shadows she had come from. Before she disappeared, she stopped and spoke without looking back. "Whatever you find or don't find, I want the truth, even if it's not what I want to hear, especially then." And then she was gone, leaving Michael alone with the weight of a world he didn't understand. For 3 nights, Michael sat at his tiny kitchen table after Jayden fell asleep, poring over the files on the USB drive. The documents were dense with jargon he didn't fully understand: quarterly earnings, subsidiary reports, operational cost analyses. But Michael didn't read them like a businessman would. He read them like someone who had spent 7 years watching money flow through restaurants and disappear into hands that were already full. Something didn't add up. The report showed personnel costs at various Whitmore Holdings subsidiaries: hotels, restaurants, service companies. The numbers were high, supposedly reflecting competitive wages and generous benefits. But Michael knew the truth about places like these. He had worked in them. The servers made minimum wage plus tips that rarely materialized. The housekeepers earned barely enough to cover rent. The benefits existed on paper, but vanished behind complicated eligibility requirements that no one ever met. If Whitmore Holdings was paying what these reports claimed, where was all that money actually going? Michael began making notes, circling discrepancies, following the trail of numbers that didn't match reality. He wasn't trained for this, but he didn't need training. He had lived the other side of these balance sheets. He knew what it felt like to be the line item that got squeezed so someone else's bonus could grow. By the 3rd night, he had found it. The money wasn't being stolen by any single person. It was being siphoned through a web of subcontractors, management fees, and administrative costs, each one small enough to seem legitimate, but together forming a river of cash that flowed upward and vanished. The system wasn't broken. The system was working exactly as designed to extract maximum value from the people at the bottom while hiding the extraction behind layers of corporate complexity. Michael sat back, staring at his notes. He had expected to find a villain, a single corrupt executive skimming funds. Instead, he had found something worse, a machine built to exploit without accountability, so diffuse that no one person could be blamed. He called Eleanor the next morning. They met at a coffee shop in a neighborhood where no one would recognize her face. Michael slid his handwritten notes across the table. "Your company isn't being robbed by a person," he said. "It's being robbed by a system. Look at these personnel cost reports. They claim your hotels pay housekeepers $22 an hour with full benefits. I can tell you right now, no hotel in America pays housekeepers that much. The money shows up on paper, but it's getting eaten by subcontractors, staffing agencies, and management fees before it ever reaches the workers." Eleanor studied the notes, her expression unreadable. "You're saying my entire cost structure is a lie?" "I'm saying someone designed it this way on purpose. Not to steal from you directly, that would be too obvious. They built a machine that looks legitimate from above but grinds people up at the bottom. The excess goes to your subsidiaries' executive bonuses, your subcontractors' profit margins, your staffing agencies' fees. Everyone gets a cut except the people actually doing the work." For a long moment, Eleanor said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "I built this company. I thought I understood every piece of it." Michael shook his head. "You understand what happens in the boardroom, but you've never been in the basement. You've never seen how the machine looks from underneath." Eleanor met his eyes and something shifted in her expression. Not anger, not defensiveness, but recognition. She had spent her entire life controlling everything around her, and she had just discovered that control was an illusion. "I built an empire on discipline and precision," she said softly. "But I never thought to look at what I was building it on." Michael leaned forward. "You built it with strength, But you forgot something along the way. You forgot to ask who was carrying the weight. The words hung between them, not as an accusation, but as a truth neither of them could deny. Eleanor had built her empire by becoming hard, unbreakable. Michael had survived by becoming soft, adaptable, patient. They were opposites in almost every way. And yet, sitting in that unremarkable coffee shop, they both understood something neither had expected. They needed what the other had. Eleanor asked Michael to work with her for 2 weeks, not as an employee, she was careful about that distinction, but as a consultant paid at a fair rate for his time. Michael hesitated. The money would help with the immediate medication costs, but he knew it wouldn't be enough for what was coming. The doctors had recently told him that Jayden would need surgery within the year, a procedure that would cost more than Michael could earn in a decade of serving tables. Still, he said yes. Not just for the money, but because of something else he couldn't quite name. For the first time in 7 years, someone had looked at him and seen more than a waiter. The 2 weeks felt like stepping into another dimension. Michael found himself in conference rooms with glass walls and tables that cost more than his annual salary. He sat in meetings where people spoke in acronyms and percentages, where decisions affecting thousands of lives were made in 15-minute windows. He understood maybe half of what was said, but he watched everything. And he noticed things the executives didn't. He noticed how the junior staff flinched when certain managers walked by. He noticed how the cleaning crew worked in silence, invisible, afraid to make eye contact with anyone in a suit. He noticed how the numbers on the presentations rarely matched the exhaustion on the faces of the people who actually generated those numbers. When he shared these observations with Eleanor, she listened without interrupting. That surprised him. He had expected her to defend her company, to explain away the problems, to dismiss his concerns as the complaints of someone who didn't understand business. Instead, she wrote everything down. "No one has ever told me these things before," she said one evening as they reviewed reports in her private office. "That's because everyone else is afraid of you." Eleanor looked up. "And you're not?" Michael considered the question. "I've been afraid of a lot of things in my life. Losing my son, missing rent, not being able to afford his medication. But being afraid of a person? No. People can only hurt you if you need something from them." "You don't need anything from me?" "I need to pay for my son's treatment, but I don't need you to do it for me. I just need to keep working, keep showing up, keep walking. I've been doing that long before I met you, and I'll keep doing it after." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then she asked a question that caught Michael off guard. "Tell me about him, your son." No one had asked Michael about Jayden in years. People knew he was a single father, but they never inquired beyond that. It was too complicated, too sad, too much. But something about Eleanor's question felt genuine. Not polite curiosity, but real interest. So Michael told her. He told her about Jayden's smile, which could light up a room even on the hardest days. He told her about the medications, the doctor's visits, the constant fear that lived in his chest like a second heartbeat. He told her about the upcoming surgery, the one that cost more than he could ever afford, the one he tried not to think about because thinking about it made him feel like he was drowning. And he told her about reading bedtime stories and watching his son fall asleep, those peaceful moments when the world felt almost bearable. When he finished, Eleanor's eyes had changed. The hardness was still there, but something beneath it had softened. "I never had children," she said. "I told myself it was a choice, that I didn't want anyone depending on me, needing me. But I think the truth is I was afraid of loving someone that much and losing them." It was the most vulnerable thing she had ever said to him. Michael understood in that moment that Eleanor Whitmore was not the cold, untouchable figure the world believed her to be. She was a woman who had built walls so high she had forgotten there was anything on the other side. On the 10th day, Michael discovered something that changed everything. He had been reviewing the projections for Eleanor's proposed restructuring plan, a sweeping reform designed to eliminate the exploitative systems he had identified. On paper, it looked elegant. Cut the unnecessary subcontractors, bring services in-house, ensure workers received fair wages directly. But when Michael traced the implications, his stomach dropped. The restructuring would eliminate hundreds of positions, not executive positions. Those were safe, protected by contracts and golden parachutes. The positions that would disappear were the low-level jobs, the housekeepers, the servers, the maintenance workers, the very people the reform was supposed to help. The subsidiaries that had been siphoning money would be shut down. That meant the people working for those subsidiaries would lose their jobs entirely. Companies that had been paying poorly would be replaced by nothing at all. Michael stared at the numbers until they blurred. He thought about the families who depended on those paychecks. Small as they were still something. He thought about what it meant to be told your job was being eliminated for the greater good, as if your survival was just a line item to be erased. He couldn't sleep that night. Jayden lay curled beside him, breathing softly, unaware that his father was trapped between two impossible choices. The next morning, Michael went to Eleanor's office. She was reviewing the same projections, a satisfied expression on her face. "The board is ready to approve the restructuring," she said. "Thanks to your analysis, we finally have a clear picture of where the problems are. We can fix this." Michael didn't sit down. "And what happens to the people who lose their jobs when you fix it?" Eleanor looked up, surprised by his tone. "Some positions will be eliminated. That's unavoidable. But the remaining workers will be paid fairly. It's a net positive. A net positive for who? For your balance sheet? For your conscience?" Michael felt something rising in his chest, something he had kept buried for years. "You're talking about hundreds of families, real people. They'll go from having bad jobs to having no jobs at all. How is that helping them? The system was exploiting them. We're dismantling the exploitation. You're dismantling the only thing keeping them alive." Michael took a breath, steadying himself. "I've been one of those people my entire adult life. I know what it's like to work a job that underpays you and treats you like garbage. But I also know what it's like to have no job at all. At least when you're being exploited, you can still feed your children." Eleanor stood, her expression hardening. "So what do you suggest? That I leave the system in place? That I keep profiting from exploitation because the alternative is inconvenient?" "No." Michael met her gaze without flinching. "I'm suggesting you find another way. A slower way. A harder way. One that doesn't save your company by destroying the people at the bottom." The silence between them stretched like a wire about to snap. "You're asking me to sacrifice profits for people I've never met," Eleanor said slowly. "I'm asking you to be the person you want to believe you are." Eleanor's jaw tightened. For a moment, Michael thought she would order him out, end their arrangement, and return to the certainty of her old life. Instead, she asked a question that surprised them both. "If you were in my position, what would you do?" Michael thought about Jayden, about the surgery that loomed over them like a storm cloud, about the weight he carried every single day. "I would remember that every number on those spreadsheets is someone's father or mother, son or daughter. I would find a way to fix the system without burning down the lives of the people trapped inside it. And if that meant growing slower, earning less, taking longer, I would do it anyway. Because the only legacy worth leaving is one you're not ashamed of." Eleanor didn't respond. She turned back to the window, staring out at the city she had conquered. Michael had said his piece. Whether she listened was beyond his control. He walked out of her office, uncertain if he had just saved something or lost everything. After Michael left, Eleanor sat alone in her office for hours. The city sprawled beneath her windows, glittering with a million lights, each one representing someone's struggle, someone's hope, someone's ordinary life. For 20 years, she had looked at that view and seen an empire to be conquered. Tonight, she saw something different. She saw all the people she had never thought to consider, the ones who cleaned her buildings, served her meals, kept the machinery running while she counted the profits. She thought about her father. He had built his company on charm and ambition, never looking too closely at the foundations. When it collapsed, he couldn't bear to face what he had done. He had left her alone with nothing but debt and shame and a note that said he was sorry. Eleanor had sworn she would never be like him. She had built Whitmore Holdings on discipline, precision, control. She had convinced herself that strength meant never needing anyone, never trusting anyone, never letting sentiment cloud judgment. But Michael had shown her something she couldn't unsee. Her empire wasn't built on strength. It was built on the backs of people who had no choice but to carry it. She pulled out his handwritten notes, the ones he had given her at the coffee shop, covered in careful observations and circled numbers. A waiter with no business degree had seen what her entire executive team had missed, not because he was smarter, but because he had looked at her company from the basement instead of the penthouse. The only legacy worth leaving is one you're not ashamed of. His words echoed in her mind, refusing to fade. Eleanor picked up the phone and called an emergency board meeting for the following morning. The board members arrived expecting a routine approval of the restructuring plan. What they got instead was something none of them had anticipated. Eleanor stood at the head of the conference table, her expression calm but immovable. The restructuring plan is changing. We will eliminate the exploitative subcontractor arrangements and management fee structures as planned, but we will not terminate the affected workers. The chief financial officer leaned forward. That's not financially viable. If we absorb those positions directly, our labor costs will increase by 18%. Then we absorb the cost. The shareholders will never accept slower growth. Eleanor's gaze swept across the room. I built this company. I decide what it becomes. If the shareholders don't like it, they can sell their stock. I'll buy it myself. The room fell silent. In 2 decades, none of them had ever seen Eleanor Whitmore choose people over profit. She continued. We will implement a transition program. Workers from the eliminated subsidiaries will be offered positions within the main company structure. We will invest in retraining. We will extend benefits immediately instead of hiding them behind impossible requirements. Growth will be slower. Profits will be smaller in the short term, but we will build something that doesn't require crushing people to function. The CFO tried one more objection. This could take years to implement properly. Then it takes years. Eleanor gathered her documents. Some things are worth doing slowly. She walked out before anyone could argue further. That same week, Eleanor made one more decision, one she told no one about. She had learned about Jaden's condition during her initial background check on Michael. She knew about the congenital heart defect, the specialized medication, the upcoming surgery that would cost more than Michael could ever afford. She remembered the way his voice had changed when he talked about his son, the fear beneath the steadiness, the love that held everything together. Eleanor could have written a check directly. She could have called Michael and offered the money as payment for his consulting work, or as a bonus, or as a gift. But she understood something that most wealthy people never learned. Money given openly creates obligation. It changes the relationship between giver and receiver in ways that can never be undone. She didn't want Michael to feel indebted to her. She didn't want his gratitude or his loyalty purchased with a transaction. What she wanted was far simpler and far more complicated. She wanted to do something good without anyone knowing. Eleanor contacted an anonymous charitable foundation, one she had funded years ago for tax purposes, but never actually used. She arranged for Jaden's entire treatment to be covered, the current medication, the surgery, the ongoing care for as long as he needed it. No conditions, no contracts, no press releases. The paperwork listed the donor as anonymous. It was the first truly selfless thing Eleanor had done in 20 years. Michael returned to the Sterling. He put on his uniform, picked up his serving tray, and went back to work, as if the past 2 weeks had been a dream. His co-workers didn't ask where he had been. They assumed he had taken sick days or dealt with a family emergency. In the restaurant industry, people came and went without explanation. It was one of the few mercies of the job. But something had changed in Michael. He moved through his shifts with a different energy, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. He still worried about Jayden, about the surgery that loomed on the horizon, but he no longer felt invisible. Someone had seen him, someone had listened, and even if nothing came of it, that memory would sustain him. 3 days after his return, Michael received a call from the hospital. The administrator's voice was confused but cheerful. "Mr. Thompson, I'm calling to inform you that your son's treatment has been fully funded through an anonymous donation. All current and future costs are covered, including the surgery. There's no remaining balance." Michael couldn't speak. He stood in the break room, phone pressed to his ear, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. "Mr. Thompson, are you still there?" "Yes," he managed. "I'm here. Are you sure there hasn't been a mistake?" "No mistake, sir. The paperwork is all in order. Your son's care is fully covered." Michael thanked her and hung up. His hands were trembling. He knew who had done it. There was no other explanation. But Eleanor had left no trace, no note, no way for him to thank her or repay her. She had simply given and then disappeared. For the first time in 7 years, Michael allowed himself to cry. 3 months passed. Jayden's surgery was a success. The doctors marveled at how well he recovered, how quickly color returned to his cheeks. He began running and playing like other children his age, no longer held back by the shadow that had hung over him since birth. Michael watched his son laugh, really laugh, and felt something loosen in his chest. A weight he had carried for so long he had forgotten it was there. One evening, Michael found a letter in his mailbox. No return address, just his name, written in elegant handwriting he recognized. He opened it carefully. "Michael, you showed me that the greatest strength isn't controlling the world. It's daring to trust another person. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in many years, I'm not afraid of it. E." Michael read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside his bed, next to the photograph of his wife. The following Saturday, Michael took Jayden to the park by the waterfront. It was their favorite place, a strip of green grass overlooking the Hudson, where the city felt far away and the sky seemed endless. Jayden ran ahead, chasing seagulls, his laughter carried by the wind. Michael sat on a wooden bench, watching his son with a peace he hadn't felt in years. Then he saw her. Eleanor walked along the path, alone. No designer clothes, no entourage, no armor of wealth. Just a woman in a simple coat looking out at the water. Their eyes met. She stopped, uncertain for the first time since he had known her. Michael didn't stand. He simply shifted slightly on the bench, making room. An invitation without words. Eleanor hesitated. Then she walked over and sat beside him. They didn't speak for a long moment. They just watched the water, the gulls, the endless sky. Jayden came running back, curious about the stranger. He stopped in front of Eleanor, studying her with the fearless honesty of childhood. Michael smiled. "Jayden, this is Miss Eleanor. She's a friend of mine." "Hi," Jayden said. "Do you like seagulls?" Eleanor's expression softened in a way Michael had never seen before. "I do now." Jayden grinned and ran off again, already distracted by something new. Eleanor watched him go. "He's beautiful." "He's everything." They sat together as the afternoon light faded, 3 people on a wooden bench, watching the world turn golden around them. No promises were made. No futures were planned. Just two broken people who had helped each other become something more whole. And somewhere in the space between them, in the silence and the setting sun, something new was beginning. Not love, perhaps. Not yet. But the possibility of it. Slow and gentle and healing.